Hi guys, it's Belle here and it is time for my July reading wrap up video. If you are new here, hello and welcome. My other favourite hobby other than crafting is to read. So this year I have started sharing my monthly reading wrap-ups. Usually I also do a little bit of crafting when I'm talking about the books that either I read on audio or ebook. And today we're just going to be making a paper snippet roll with some scraps. That's all I'm going to be doing as I'm talking to you. So July was quite a good month, I'd say. It was definitely a bit more successful than last month. And, well, July now is last month, but more successful than June. I read 12 books in July. And I read or listened to 4 audiobooks, which is quite good because I didn't do as many audiobooks in June. So as always, I will put the image up here whilst I am talking about that particular book. So the first one I want to talk about is called The Children of Gods and Fighting Men. It is by Shauna Lawless and it is the first in the Gale Song series. I think there's 3 books with kind of like another companion book coming out this year. Now, I was surprised at just how much I enjoyed this book. It is basically set in about 960 and we go all the way up in the first book to 900 and I want to say 92, something like that. It is a mixture of Irish mythology and history blended together. So we are following 2 main characters. We are following Fola and we are following Gormla, both women. And basically Ireland at this time in history didn't just have Irish people, but the Vikings had landed and kind of made their home there and things like that. But in this particular book, we have the descendants of the Tuatha De Danann, who are the Irish gods. By this point, the gods have kind of gone into the other world, which isn't hell or anything like that. It's not our version of that. It's just like imagine Avalon. It's that kind of crossover into the mystical, magical realm. But they have left behind children who are called descendants. And for each of these children usually has a gift from the god they're descendant from. So the god line, the genealogy. So whether that be healing or poetry or warrior or any of that kind of thing. And then alongside them, you have the descendants of the Fomorian races. Now, if you have watched my Lunasa tag swap with Tiff, you will know a little bit about the Fomorians because I spoke about them. But basically, the Fomorians were part of the landscape of the country that became known as Ireland. Before the Tuatha De Danann arrived, they had battles. And so in this book, the descendants of the Tuatha De Danann have wiped out what they believe is most of the descendants of the Fomorians. But Fola is a healer. She's a descendant of one of the Tuatha De Danann. Gormla is a descendant of a Fomorian. And she is in hiding. But she is also married or was married to a king. But he was a Viking king. So she was married off to one of the Vikings. And her mother, because both sets of descendants have longer lifespans, her mother has come to warn her, you need to move on soon, your husband has died, at some point people are going to notice you are not aging. And by the way, some of the descendants found one of your brothers and that, so you might need to go into hiding. But Gormla has a son with the king, but he's the youngest son, and the king had children with his queen before he married Gormla. So she is worried that her son Citric will be murdered. So then you have Fola, who the descendants of the Tuatha De Danann have a kind of they don't interact with mortals anymore. The only thing that they will do is they will help women and children when there are battles, but they don't interact. They don't get involved in politics and things like that. But Fola likes people. She likes the humans, and she is a healer. So she is told to go undercover by Toma, who runs the Tuatha De Danann, the descendants, and she's told to go undercover at the court of Brian Boru. Now, Brian Boru is a real figure. He is considered one of the greatest Irish kings, and we kind of go from there. Gormla's trying to keep her son in power. She's not very well liked by anyone, and she's trying to do political shenanigans. And then we have Fola, who's just trying to keep her nephew safe, and also do what her people have asked her to do. And throughout the book, the two are moving closer and closer together because of actions that are happening. And as I said, this is based both on mythology, so the Fomorians and the Tuatha De Danann, but a lot of the men mentioned in here, like Brian Boru and even Gormla's son, why won't my glue come out, are actual people. So I would say not a lot happens. This is a huge book. It was over 14 hours long. But I would recommend, if you do, oh gosh, that's too much. If you do listen to audiobooks, I would recommend listening to this as an audio, because you will get, as I always say, you get to hear the language spoken as it's meant to be pronounced and things like that. And to be honest, Gormla is not likable. She's just not, but I don't think she's meant to be likable. That was one of the problems. I gave this a 4. Not a lot happens, and yet I couldn't stop listening to this 14-hour book. I just couldn't put it down, even though not a lot was actually happening as we were going through it. But I do wish that we didn't have such a distinctive Gormla being unlikable and mean and cruel, and Fola being kind and gentle and sweet. I wish there wasn't that. I would prefer them to be more complex, but there are more books. So I don't know, maybe as we go through the stories will be a little bit different. They are just about to meet, so that's exciting for the next book in the series. So yes, as I said, not a lot really happens, and yet I found myself highly invested and even a little emotional at times. This is a book based in medieval Ireland, so there are battles that happen, war wounds are described, things like that, so be aware of that going into it. But if you like Irish mythology, or you like sort of historical fiction, especially of a different time period, this might be a book for you to check out. I'm definitely continuing in the series. I would love to reread this actually. Again, not a lot happened, but I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. So that is The Children of Gods and Fighting Men by Shauna Lawless. I'm not even sure if I really explained too much what happens. 2 women, 2 different sides, lots is going on, men are battling for kingship, and they're both just trying to keep themselves together and protect the ones they love. So another audiobook I listened to was a non-fiction, and it is Songbird, an intimate portrait of Christine McVie, and it was by, who was this one by? I'm trying to see. Oh, Lesley-Ann Jones, I believe. And again, I listened to this on audio. Now, if you are new here, you may not know, but I absolutely love Fleetwood Mac as a group. I love their music. I usually go and watch the tribute band that is on all the time, every year. Like, I just love their stuff. And obviously we lost the beautiful Christine a couple of years ago, so this was a non-fiction. And in reality, even though it said intimate portrait of Christine McVie, obviously she was part of Fleetwood Mac, so a lot of the book does discuss Fleetwood Mac. There's a lot of musical history in this book, the different bands they've been in, people they've played with, all that kind of thing, their songs, how they were written, the bands they were in before they were in the Mac. Like, just, it's very in-depth. And at times I wish I'd had the physical book, just because sometimes I got a little confused, because I kind of gave this a 4 because yeah, I did get a little confused at times as who was who and what was happening and where we were. And I have to say I was most invested in the bits that were about Fleetwood Mac and Christine McVie. You know, when we think of Fleetwood Mac, we often think of Stevie Nicks, who is super talented as well, and I love her music. But I think it was poignant that at the start of this book, the person who wrote it actually knew Christine McVie. She was a friend of hers, I believe. And she states that when Christine passed away and Fleetwood Mac was being played on every radio station, she said, you know, what was interesting or sad or whatever it was, that a lot of the music being played was not specifically Christine McVie. It was Stevie Nicks singing it or things like that. So, you know, that was a little bit poignant there. But I just really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed listening to it. I enjoyed learning more about Christine. I enjoyed listening about, you know, her relationships, not just with McVie, who she married and kept the name of, but with other men in her life. And I just really loved it. She was a very, very talented woman. It's very sad that she's now passed. And I have to admit that when we got to the bit where she passed away, oh my goodness, it made me well up. I mean, I just listened to several hours of her life. And in between, when I wasn't listening, I was listening to a lot of her music to kind of go alongside the experience. And yeah, I just welled up when it talked about her passing. And then it does like this short chapter where all the people who came out to speak after Christine's passing to, you know, well wish and stuff. So many people, obviously bandmates, but then just people like Belinda Carlisle and Shania Twain and just all these people. And it had this whole little chapter where it was all of these things that they said, and that made me well up again. And then right at the end, which I really like this, and I think a lot of memoirs should do this, but what I really liked was right at the end, the final chapter. It was basically a timeline from the time she was born, what she went into, these different events in her life. It was just this timeline of dates and notes. And I thought that's brilliant, because I feel like I've caught up a bit better. You know, it's kind of reminded me of everything. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I do think others should do that. So that was just a little bit of a quirky one for me that I really wanted to read. It's been on my to read pile for quite a while. I don't tend to keep biographies and memoirs or autobiographies or things like that. I don't tend to keep them because once I've read them, it's very rare for me to want to reread them, which is why I got this on audio. But it was definitely worth listening to. Yeah, and as I said, it made me cry, and it's just made me, I've been listening to her music, her individual music. She brought out some solo albums, excuse me, and I've been listening to that a lot since reading it. So if you are a Mac fan or just a music fan, I highly recommend picking that one up. Then I read Last Pen Standing, which is a cozy murder mystery. It's by Vivian Conroy, and it is book 1 in the stationery shop mystery. Now, I just needed something, and cozy mysteries and things kind of are just a relaxing read for me, and I picked this one up on audio. And to be honest, guys, I gave it a 3. It wasn't bad. I was super excited because it was a stationery shop, and you know, we're crafters, and many of us also love stationery, and I was excited to see a cozy mystery. I haven't read one set in a stationery shop before. However, I felt like this one was very much focused on the mystery. Sorry, I'm looking for something to put down. But I wasn't getting a lot of maybe the stationery shop vibes, because basically this, I can't even remember her name now, so it doesn't really matter. But someone turns up. Her grandmother has gifted her some money because she's like, I love you. I want to gift you this money before I pass away because I want to see what you do with it while I'm still here. And so this person is an illustrator, and she decides to give up her corporate job, and her friend runs this stationery shop in this cute little town, and she kind of buys into it. She becomes a partner. So one of the things I enjoy in cozy mysteries is seeing people set up their business and kind of building it up. I like to know all the ins, all that kind of thing, and we just don't get that with this one because the stationery shop is already up and running, and she's just a partner in it. I think we only see like 2 scenes in the stationery shop as well, and then they have like this stationery party, and it's at the party where someone is murdered. To be honest, I kind of worked out who did it quite quickly. I don't think the motive was that inspiring of a motive, and I wasn't invested in any of the characters. So it was a fun read. I'm not going to say it wasn't. It was what I needed at the time, but it's one of those books that, I mean, already most of it has gone out of my head. I won't be continuing the series. I think there's only 3 books. There seems to be, in cozy mystery world, there seems to be this reoccurring theme where it's the curse of the 3rd book, that people get a 3rd book in a series, but then they don't get any more. But I wouldn't have been continuing with it anyway. It was fun. It was okay. Nothing earth-shattering. Mystery wasn't amazing. Motives weren't anything new. And yeah, it was fine. It was a book. I read it. It got a 3. And then the final book that I listened to on audio, I'm taking part in What Victoria Read's reading challenge. It's been running for a couple of months. And so one of the prompts was a seasonal read, and it was July. So I picked up a Christmas audiobook, and it was Murder at the Christmas Emporium by Andreina Cordani. It's up here. Excuse me for butchering the name. And it is what it says. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything for you in case you want to read it. I gave this 3.75, but I kind of guessed going in one of the big plot twists, because it does state that this has a similar plot device to another very famous mystery book that I know very well because I've read it quite a few times. So I was already looking for that when I went into this book, which I just think spoiled it a little bit. You've basically got this magical Christmas shop that is stuck almost in the Victorian era, and it had closed down after something had happened, and it's reopened its doors. And all these people get an invite, like almost special influencer people get that. They're not influencers, it's not social media, but these people get an invite to the opening. So whilst the shop is full of lots of other people, these people have a special invite. They're being shown around by the son of the original owner, and they're all having this amazing time. And then they all kind of start acting super drunk and strange. And then next thing you know, they're all waking up in this locked room, and there is a dead body. And we go from there. One of the people who's gone to this has kind of taken her boss's invite by she's kind of sneaked it. So she's trying to work out what's going on, because she's like, well, it's got nothing to do with me because I'm here by accident. And we kind of go from there. And I'm going to say the atmosphere was brilliant. You did get the creepy Christmas vibes. The person who originally owned this shop loved puppets and mechanical puppets. And so there's lots of these kind of creepy mechanical elves. There's this backstory that goes back to, I think, the Victorian times. So you have that kind of in there too. And their phones have been taken. I love it. Modern mysteries, I think I don't get on with quite as much, because I don't like the way the internet and the phones are often involved. This one, their phones have been taken, and when they escape the room, everything else, there's no way out, and any other phones have been disconnected, and there's no computers and anything like that. And so they have to work this out for themselves, whilst all mistrusting each other, obviously. And we kind of go from there. They're stuck there. It's Christmas Eve. None of them really have people who are going to worry about them. So, and people start to die. So, it really did give me the creepy vibes, which is brilliant, because that's often what I'm wanting. Not scary creepy, just you get the kind of tension. They're locked in this place and they can't get out, and you can really feel that, and the mistrust between them all. So I think it was quite well written. What I will say is, again, I kind of knew what the main twist was going to be, because I don't know if it's on the back of the book. I don't know if it's in a review for the book, but someone had kind of spoilt it, because I was like, well, I know this is going to happen. So now I'm just looking, and I kind of guessed, because it's pretty obvious to me. Anyway, it was pretty obvious. So that was a bit of a letdown. And I also found the reasoning behind the murders, the reason everyone is there. I understood why people were there. I understood, like, what they had done. But I also thought the reasoning for the person who was doing the murdering, I found that a bit kind of far-fetched. I basically thought the atmosphere was great. The story was an interesting take on a famous twist, and it was a good seasonal read, and I enjoyed listening to it. But motive and murderer, especially the murderer, I actually feel, if you've seen The Mousetrap, I feel like the foundation for why that was written, if you knew that, that would be another kind of spoiler for what goes on in this book. And I don't like it. I don't like the person who's the murderer. It's really hard to say about spoilers. I don't like someone who we really like and has a difficult time maybe, and this, that and the other, and then they don't get a redemption arc. I don't like that. I feel like, I know it's realistic, but I also feel like it's just too easy to kind of, it's too easy a cliche to use. I suppose that's what I'm going for. But I suppose it's popular and that's why people do it. I don't know. I can't explain it because I do not want to give anything away about the book in case you want to read it, because I do think it's a good murder mystery festive read. It's quite gruesome. Again, it really does remind me, even some of the deaths remind me of a very famous book. This seems to have been highly inspired by that book. So I recommend reading it, and I don't want to give any spoilers. I'm just saying, for me, the mystery, the motive, and the murderer kind of just felt very too obvious, and I just felt a little bit sad that it wasn't something a bit more interesting. And I wish a particular character had a better redemption arc. I don't really like the storyline they were given. Anyway, I still say read it. I'm going to put this away. This is my... We've just started with some brown paper. We're just working with some scraps. I have some little stitching bits, tickets and all sorts. Snippet roll. I'll continue with that, but I'm going to clear this away so we can get on to the physical. The first of the physical books that I really want to talk about is The Skeleton Key by Erin Kelly. This is kind of modern mystery book. I'll just read you the back. 50 years ago, Frank Churcher wrote the book that would make his family's fortune and ruin their lives. The Golden Bones was written as a fairy tale and treasure map, but it quickly turned into some dangerous obsession for a cult of readers desperate to find the missing piece of the puzzle. The Churchers were torn apart by the fame, and after a terrifying attack, Frank's daughter Nell became a recluse. With the family reunited to mark the anniversary of publication, Frank has one last surprise in store. It's finally time to reveal the location of the missing treasure, but some secrets are meant to stay buried. Now, this is very loosely based on the book The Masquerade by Kit Williams, I believe, that was out in the 70s, where the main character in this, Frank Churcher, creates a book with these clues to this little golden skeleton, that different bones are hidden across the country. If you can look through this book, it's meant to be he's based his book on an old folklore song, and the song talks about someone who loves a woman so much that when she dies, they can bring her back together. So there's this kind of idea that you can, if you reunite the little gold skeleton, it will bring back Eleanor, who's the main character in Frank's book, as well as actually in this book, because he goes on to name his daughter after the character of Eleanor, which then leads to all sorts of problems and for her, which is why she becomes a recluse. Now, to be honest, I feel like I gave this a 3, and I feel like there's a couple of things that make it that for me. It is an okay book. It is a chunker. It is nearly, I think, 600 pages. Actually, or no, over 500 pages. So it is a chunky book. And when I brought this, I'd seen it everywhere. Everyone was going crazy about it. I knew it had this like mystery element, which I love. And I remember going into my local bookshop, and one of the sellers that I often talk to, she had read it in one sitting and loved it. And I was like, okay, like, let's have a go. I'm going to be honest, I really didn't enjoy this book. I really struggled to pick it up. It took me nearly 2 weeks to finish, and it almost put me in a reading slump. In fact, a couple of books this month put me in a bit of a reading slump. I didn't enjoy it, and there are a couple of reasons for that. The Churchers, and I can't remember the name of the other family, but basically Frank and his friend Lally have been friends since maybe university, and they both meet their future wives. They buy houses next to each other. Their children grow up together. Frank's son marries Lally's daughter. Like, it's this whole thing. But basically, they are just not very nice people. There were some characters in here that I felt I could sort of like. In particular, the young girl who lives with Eleanor, who is 15, and Eleanor's kind of taking care of her. Kind of like her. And I did like Lally's wife, Bridget, a little bit, but basically there's no very nice characters in this book. It is horrible people doing horrible things to each other. Frank Churcher is a horrendous person, which it's okay to have people you don't like in books, but I need to have some sort of connection with them. Also, I really just didn't see, there was a mystery, but it wasn't the mystery I thought it was going to be. Like, I thought we were going to delve a lot more into the people who were hunting down these different bones and things like this, but it's more the mystery of the family itself, and something happens at the party which we're then trying to work out. To be honest, I did not care. So horrible people doing horrible things to each other, no really great characters. I also felt this was very much felt like family drama. I don't tend to read those kind of books. I'm not interested in intense family drama in that way. I don't watch it. I don't read it. You know, really dysfunctional family drama. It's not my thing. The mystery, like I said, it was a very small thing. The one thing I did really like about this book is it flipped timelines. So we go back to when Frank and Lally first kind of meet Frank's wife Cora, and we go back to when the book's originally created. And there are parts in the book, I'm trying to see because I'm trying to be careful, but there are parts in the book where it will say, it'll tell you all the date usually at the start of the book, so it tells you the date, and we're going through different timelines. We're going through Frank and Lally kind of growing up and this book coming together, and then we're going through kind of the 90s with what's happening with now, and now we're in the, you know, the 2024, 25, whenever. I think this book came out last year, maybe the year before. And in some of the chapters you'll have Frank up, Lally down, so it'll be different paragraphs telling you that Frank's doing better than Lally, and then maybe in a different chapter it'll be Lally up, Frank down. So I kind of like that. I like the historical aspect, and I think I've come to realize that about me. I just don't really like a lot of intense modern murder mysteries. I like cozy mysteries, modern cozy mysteries, but I don't really like new modern mysteries. I don't like things that have lots of phone access and internet and computer. Like, it's not for me. This was very modern family drama. The mystery wasn't that integral really to the plot. I didn't think it was more about a family imploding, and the ending was okay, but it just kind of left it with not much resolved family wise. I gave it a 3 because it was all right and I finished it, and I think for a lot of people it would be a great book, but for me, I've just realized that what I like in a mystery is quite specific. I like the feel of a cozy classic mystery, even if it's in a modern day setting, and I don't want really horrible people and really horrible families doing really horrible things to each other. I just don't want that. So it was a 3. It was all right. Okay, let's get on to this book. This is a book of two halves. Firstly, can we say, look at that cover, isn't it absolutely stunning? I still remember buying this book. I bought it last year on a trip to Greenwich. I picked this up, and actually the fairy tale book that I think I spoke about a couple of months ago. So Goddess with 1,000 Faces. I hadn't seen this anywhere when I bought it, and I just thought, oh my goodness, it is absolutely, look at the little stars on the spine. It's absolutely stunning, just stunning. Now, it says it's a beautiful weave of history, myth and storytelling by Jasmine Elmer, who is a modern, she It says here she is an ancient world expert. She's been on lots of different programs and TV and in lots of different like magazines. It says here deciding her subject needed a glow up. Now that's part of the problem with my book, that term just there, glow up. So it's, as I said, a tale of two halves, book of two halves. This is so stunning, this book. I am going to struggle to part with this, but I may have to. So we've got several of the goddesses, and what I really loved was that whilst we have people like Freya and Artemis and even Kali and Isis, there's other goddesses in there that are not so well known by the general public, and even a couple that I haven't really come across much before. So I really loved that. And what she does is she'll start off with an image, and then she kind of gives you a retelling of a myth that's kind of linked to that goddess. And it is a retelling because not everything's exact, but that's kind of what myths and stories are. Loved that bit, loved the retelling bit. And then she goes into a little bit about the history of that culture, of how that goddess might or might not have been worshipped, what anthropologists and things like that have kind of found, bits and pieces and buildings, and that was fascinating. And then it was like it was written by two different people, because then suddenly she would go into a bit sort of just telling you her thoughts on the goddess and how we can really learn from that goddess and what that goddess says about women and how we can bring that into our daily life. Now, my problem with this book was that I felt like at times the tone and the way it was written, it was very... the bit just talking about the goddess and how we can kind of interpret that goddess, not the historical aspect or cultural aspect, felt very basic as a writing style. I felt like even at times it almost felt like it was written almost for middle grade up to young adult, whereas this is aimed at adult audience. And I just didn't find that in the writing. Now, she says literally in here that when she turned 40, she realised she wanted to... she realised in the world around her how badly women had it. And I'm thinking, you got to 40 and you realise that? Like, you're an ancient world expert. You should have realised that from the beginning, and how she wanted to change that, and she wanted to write a book about it and all this kind of thing. She wants to give it a glow up. She wants to, you know, get the word out there about how the patriarchy is bad. Now, I read a lot of feminist books. I have since I was a teenager. I love books with strong female characters, strong feminist themes, intersectional feminism, the whole thing. And I think that was the problem. I think if you've never read feministic works before, or if you've never come across the concept of the patriarchy or goddesses before, like if you're like 12 or 13, this is a great book. But this was not for me, because I felt like the tone, like I said, was aimed at a much younger... I've bookmarked a few things. So, and the other thing was she kept repeating things so much, and it was almost like, yeah, isn't that so bad? Isn't the patriarchy like really bad? Like, whoa, man, the patriarchy is so bad. I felt like it was the kind of thing that, you know, someone who's not been around children a lot. I'm not saying she hasn't, but it reminded me of when I was working in schools. You could always tell the teachers and that who hadn't been around a lot of younger children or teenagers, or if you were out on trips, because they would come over and go like, oh yeah, dude, like that's really cool. They'd try and do what they thought of was cool lingo, which usually wasn't. It was like 10 years out of date, a lot of the lingo. And they would talk like they were trying to get down with the kids, man, just trying to like be one of the kids. And it's just like, no, you just talk to them normally. And it gave me those vibes. So I underlined a few things. So like this type of wording, she's talking about the Vikings. She says, step with me into the world of Vikings, a society bustling with adventure, exploration and unique social structure. That in itself reminded me like of a young kids book. And then she says, a culture ruled by fearsome warriors who would absolutely nail Ultimate Fighter championships today. And I'm like, what is that? Why have you kind of done that? It's like Ultimate Warrior. And then this, something like this. The nemesis of Athens was the city of Sparta. You might know those muscly guys from the movie 300. I was just like, no, I don't like it. I think she was trying to do too many cultural references that she thought was cool and would make this book approachable, and it just didn't. Or like, this is an idea of how she repeated herself repeatedly, like I'm saying. So she's talking about Freya. Her significance stemmed from her associations with love, beauty, fertility. And then she's like, Freya's multifaceted nature and her dominion over fundamental aspects of human existence. One of Freya's key roles was that of love and fertility. Well, she's just said that. And then she talks about it again. And then down here, she talks about love. And then she talks about fertility. And it's mentioned 4 times in the same paragraph. We get it. Why are you repeating it? And then she'd sort of change the wording slightly, but be talking about the same thing. And I don't need to read 3 pages where you're just saying repeatedly that she's to do with love and fertility. Love and fertility. People would worship her as a love goddess. They'd go for her if they needed help with love. They'd go for this. And it's just like, okay, I get it. That's what people, blessings were sought. You know, it was just... There was something about this book that I felt was so... It clashed. It really did. And I can't get my head around it. I gave it a 3.5 because I thought the stuff on the goddesses, the cultural and historical stuff, I really feel like I would have preferred this book if it was an in-depth historical study. Not, oh, let's give it a glow up. Yeah, those muscly guys from Sparta. Do you remember that movie? It's like, why are you doing this? And it did feel like Feminism 101 for a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old. It kind of felt like that. So I get what she was trying to do. It didn't work for me, but I would still pick it up if you're interested in mythological goddesses and some of their stories. I'd pick it up for that. Would I say rush out and buy it? Possibly not. It just, yeah, the tone just clashed. And what I really didn't get is sometimes when she was redoing the story, the myth, when she was retelling that, her language was so beautiful and her sentence structure really worked and there wasn't the repetition. And so I know she can write beautifully. But then she's just like trying to be your cool aunt and talk about things that, oh my gosh, like I'm 40 now. Have you ever heard of the patriarchy and the fact that women couldn't vote in certain parts of the world and maybe still can't? And you're just kind of looking, thinking that should be something you're doing in your 20s. So anyway, let's get on. So I'm trying to do the books I dislike most, I think, first. So as you all know, I've been rereading Poirot, and this I was super excited and interested about. So Black Coffee is a play that was written in the 1930s, I believe, 1929 she wrote it. And it was a play by Agatha Christie. It starred Poirot. It was in response to a play. She'd seen someone put on her play of... The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and was very unhappy with it, as she was with quite a few plays and some film of her books. And so in response, she wrote her own play, Black Coffee. Now, I have never read this play. I've never read any kind of short story of it or anything. And Charles Osborne adapted this as a novel. Now, he actually, I think, played the Doctor in this play. In the 1960s, I want to say, or 50s. He actually played that character. And years later, he wrote a book about Agatha Christie and then approached the Agatha Christie Foundation about the idea of taking that play that he's been in that didn't do a long run like The Mousetrap, that very few people have ever heard of, that very few people saw in comparison to like something like The Mousetrap or other plays. And he wanted to adapt it as a novel for a new audience. And so this falls between my last Poirot and the other, but I've never read this. I've only ever read the novels, and the short stories, not the play. So when I found out about this, and I know the Agatha Christie Foundation are very strict on who they give the rights to any rewritings of the work, any TV adaptations, and any plays or any movies. Like, they are rigorous. They take care of Agatha Christie's legacy amazingly, and they won't just give the rights to anyone. So when Charles Osborne got the okay, I thought, oh my gosh, I know it's not going to be Agatha, but because it's her play, I'm excited to read it, because this is something I haven't read of Agatha, and you know, she passed away many years ago. There's not a lot new of hers. I really hated this book. If you are reading Poirot, as I know one or two of you are, you're reading the series sort of alongside me, I don't know if you should read this. You may want to if you never have before, especially when I'm going to say how much I disliked it. That might get your interest. But I really disliked this book. Now, the story's fine. There is it a colonel? Sir Cloud Amory, he creates a new, the formula for a new explosive type of material. This crops up as a theme in quite a few of Agatha's stories or plays, short stories or novels. And he's having a house party, and he thinks one of his guests are going to steal the formula, and he calls Poirot up to come down. By this point, Poirot's kind of retired, but he's like, I'll come down with Hastings. And before Poirot gets there, the formula does indeed go missing, and Sir Claude is murdered. And we basically, all of the action takes place, for the majority of it, I'd say 90% of it takes place in one room, which is the room where it's like a sitting room where they were all sitting where Sir Claude died. So it all takes place there. We've got his son and his son's wife, an unexpected visitor who's suddenly turned up, Sir Claude's sister, his niece. We've got all these characters. And obviously Poirot has to work out who did it, and is it linked to the formula, and there's all the red herrings and all the things you would expect. So the story itself is fine, but I'm just going to say it. I could tell within the first 2 pages that this is obviously not written by Agatha Christie. Even if Charles Osborne has taken the play and put sentences and paragraphs and pieces in, which I don't know because I've not read the play, but I'm guessing that's what he did. I can tell that this is not written by Agatha Christie. Now, is she the most amazing writer in the world? No. There are writers that I read who have words on the page that feel like poetry to your soul, like music, like it's beautiful. You get so enraptured. But there is a tone to Agatha's work, and she is so clever and witty with just a simple word. And I just feel that was lacking. So that was already a problem for me, because I'm just like, well, it doesn't feel like Agatha Christie, but I know it's Agatha Christie, but it doesn't feel like that. Then by the time Poirot and Hastings turn up, I really did not like the way their relationship was portrayed, or how Hastings was almost made so ridiculously stupid. Now, we all know there's the joke, because Poirot kind of is always saying to Hastings, oh, poor Hastings, like, you know, can you not work it out, this, that, and the other. But let me just read you a few things. You can see I've tabbed a few things. I just want to read them to you so you can kind of get what I'm meaning. So what is it? So Poirot says, what is your impression of Dr. Corelli? Asked Poirot. Dr. Corelli, sir, replied the butler rather haughtily, is not one of us. Not quite understanding Treadwell's remark, Poirot looked inquiringly at Hastings, who turned away to hide a smile. Throwing his colleague a glance of mild reproof, Poirot turned again to Treadwell. So it's like, Poirot would understand not one of us. He would understand that. Now, I'm not saying this wasn't in the play. I am just saying he would have understood that. He's always been called that little foreigner, that strange little man. He, you know, oh, you're so foreign. He understands the term, not one of us. And for Hastings to kind of almost laugh at Poirot about it, I didn't like that. So that annoyed me. Then we have this. Where is it? For the moment, I am content to wait. As to why I wait, ABN, to the intelligence of Hercule Poirot, things are sometimes perfectly clear, which are not clear to those who are not so greatly gifted. Now, Poirot does kind of talk like that, but not this bluntly. Like, Agatha would have worded that differently slightly. Good Lord, Poirot, Hastings exclaimed. Do you know, I'd give a considerable sum of money to see you make a thorough AS of yourself. Just for once, you are so conceited. Do not enrage yourself, my dear Hastings, he replied soothingly. I observe there are times when you seem almost to detest me. Alas, I suffer the penalties of greatness. Like, that doesn't feel like Poirot and his relationship. This bit, Poirot tapped Hastings on the head. How astute, my dear friend. Right now, yes, Poirot taps. I'm literally reading Peril at End House at the moment, and Poirot taps him on the leg. He doesn't tap him on the head like a puppy dog, so that irritated me. And where was the other thing? Oh, this is showing how stupid he makes him. But naturally, it is an idea, Poirot cried. Am I not Hercule Poirot? See now where this idea leads us. It tells us that the murder of St. Claude was not a chance manoeuvre executed on the spur of the moment. It was planned beforehand. You see now where we are? No, Hastings admitted with an engaging candour. You know very well I never see these things. I know that we're in the library of St. Claude's house, and that's all. Like, Hastings is not so stupid to go, no, I don't know where we are. I know we're in a library. That's all I know. Like, it's so annoying. Poirot is so conceited and arrogant in this book, and not in a lovable way, because, you know, he is a bit conceited and arrogant, but not in a lovable way. Him and Hastings, like, Hastings is always laughing at Poirot and, like, shouting at him, and he's like, oh, do get down, Poirot, and stop being so annoying. He's always having to go at him. Poirot's tapping him on the head and calling him stupid, and then there's that scene where Hastings is like, oh, I don't know where we are, and I'm sorry, I didn't like it. I'm sure Charles Osborne is an amazing writer, and I'm sure there is plenty in this book that comes from the original play. I do not know. I am now on the hunt to try and track down a version of the actual play, not a novelised edition of it, but just so I can compare. But I dislike, like, if this was the first piece of work I'd ever read, I would never have read any more Agatha Christie. I would not like Poirot or Hastings. So the murder's fine. You kind of know who it is, sort of. There's all the usual red herrings. I've read Agatha Christie a lot, so I pick up on those kind of things. But the tone was off. The relationships were off. And I think one of the things that let this down is normally in the books, depending, if Hastings is in the book, he's normally narrating the book. It's a bit like Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. Dr. Watson is writing the plays. So you get a lot from Dr. Watson's point of view. And when you do that with Hastings, when he does it, you see so much of the character of Hastings, of who he is. Yes, he hasn't got the amazing mental capacity of Poirot, but there's a lot to Hastings to love. There's this kind of affable, chappy, sweet-natured guy, and he was not that in this. He was just made out to be stupid or a bit mean. Obviously he's still after the girl, and Poirot was just rude and horrible. And I gave this originally, I believe, let me check, 3. I'm going to put it down to a 2. That's how much I disliked it. I don't even think I'm going to keep it in my collection. The only reason I would is because I obviously am trying to collect the complete works. I have most of Agatha Christie's work, and I'm starting to collect the work she did under her other pen name. That would be the only reason I might keep this, but I really didn't like it, and I don't know what else to say. Between this, which was enjoyable but still a slog to get through, and this, I was almost in a reading slump. So let's get on to some books that were more enjoyable. So, as you will know, I finished Patricia Briggs's Mercy Thompson series last month. So she has an offshoot of that called the Alpha and Omega series. This is all focused on Charles, who is the Marok, who's the head of the North American werewolf clans. That's Bran. Charles is Bran's son. We meet Charles a few times in Mercy Thompson, not often actually. We meet Bran more, and we meet Charles's brother Samuel. Now, Charles is half Native American. He has a different gift as a werewolf than many of the others. He's the only, as far as they know, the only person born as a werewolf. Everyone else has to be made. And his mother had sort of magics to herself. And he is also his father's enforcer. He goes out and makes sure that everything's kept as it should be, make sure any werewolves that are causing problems are dealt with and things like that. And before this book, there is a short story that you can read and is also in the anthology Shifting Shadows by Patricia Briggs. And that is how Charles meets who becomes his mate, Anna. She has been turned into a werewolf, and she is absolutely traumatized by her pack. I will say that these books have a darker side to them maybe than the Mercy Thompson. There is a lot of stuff in Mercy Thompson, but this does a bit more on page or speaks about certain subjects a bit more. So be aware of that if you haven't read these. It's called Alpha and Omega because Charles is an alpha werewolf and she is an omega wolf, and it's very, very rare. And in this book, he is bringing Anna back to the Marok's clan in Montana. The Marok kind of has this area where wolves who are more troubled can come and live there, and because he is able to, as the main alpha of the whole north of America, kind of make sure they're safe and taken care of and keeps their kind of sides at bay a little bit. And so Charles brings Anna back there. He's very beat up after what's happened in the short story. And he knows he's mated to Anna, but he doesn't know how to go about this because of what Anna has experienced in her previous pack. And then murders start happening in the woods nearby. And Charles has to go and work out. It definitely seems to be a werewolf that's doing the murders. They can't have this particularly on their doorstep. And him and Anna go into the wilds to try and track down, and it's kind of linked to another wolf that the Marok has had in his camp for a while, and there's this whole historical aspect to it which I kind of loved. I gave this a 3.7. I loved being back in the world of the Mercy Thompson. I loved being back with certain characters that I knew in an area that I knew, but I did miss Mercy. I did miss her little group of friends that she has around her. And Charles is an interesting character because he's very complex. He keeps to himself a lot. And Anna's dealing with a lot of trauma, which is hard to see on page. But it was still really good and I enjoyed it. It's also written maybe late 90s, early 2000s. So whilst I have always found Patricia Briggs to deal with certain subjects very respectably, obviously there's some terms in here that may now not be as PC sort of thing, which is great because Patricia Briggs gets better with each book and always takes that into account. But that doesn't mean she's ever disrespectful in here. And there's interest with Charles. I love the way that he speaks a lot about both sort of Western ideas of God as well as the spirits and the spiritual practices of Indigenous Americans. So I enjoyed it. I'm interested to see where this goes and how Charles and Anna adapt. It's going to be interesting if other characters like Mercy and that crop up, because I know these books, if you read the timelines, the Mercy Thompson and the Alpha and Omega, they're kind of slotted in the Alpha and Omega in between certain novels. So it will often say, you know, things in this book happened before this book. So I find that interesting. Anyway, I can't wait to continue. I think there's 5 or 6 books in this series. So I will be having more of the wonderful Patricia Briggs, who's one of my favourite authors, and I love her series. And this is a series I've never read before. I've never, ever read the Alpha and Omegas, whereas I'd read quite a lot of the Patricia Briggs, Mercy Thompson series. So this is new to me, so loving that. Then I also read Before Your Memory Fades. This is book 3 in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. This is translated, oh, I forgot to say, this is kind of paranormal fantasy. This is translated fiction by, I always get his name slightly wrong, Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I apologize, no disrespect meant. I gave this a 4. Now, I loved Before the Coffee Get Cold. I've read it 3 times. I wasn't as keen on the second book, but in this book, so the original 2 books take place in a little special cafe. This is kind of a magical realist literary fiction. And they take place in Japan, and they're at this little cafe, the Funicula, and basically you can go there and you can be sent forward or backwards in time. You have to sit at a certain seat, you have to drink coffee poured by a certain person, and then you have to return before the coffee gets cold. And the stories, it's usually split up into stories. I think there's 4 in here, yes. And they've started giving these maps, these sort of character maps, which are really good. But in this one, we have moved. We are in Mount Hakodate. And basically the guy who owns Funicula, he has gone to this cafe, Donna, which is actually owned by his mother, with Kazu, his cousin, who's the person who pours the coffee, because his mother's gone off on a quest to help someone. And so he's gone over to run the Donna cafe, and has left someone else in charge of his cafe. Same setup, there's a magical table, you can go forwards or backwards in time, someone has to pour the coffee, all that kind of thing. But what I really loved about this book is we get to see new characters, but actually there's like a little cameo of a couple of characters that we know from the first book as well, which is sweet. We've moved on in time. We're about, I want to say 16 years in the future since the first book. And you're finding out more about Nagari, who is the son of the woman who owns Donna. You'll find out more about Kazu. Their lives have changed. What's happened? Now, I will say this got 4 stars. I think I preferred this to the second book. The daughter made me sob, as did the sister. The comedian, I could have done without. That didn't do anything for me, that story. And the young man was quite a nice one, but it hasn't really stuck in my head. But the daughter, oh my goodness. So this lady turns up at the cafe. She wants to go back in history. She's got this photo of her parents holding her as a baby. But soon after that photo was taken, they unfortunately passed away. She then lived with family and friends, and she just didn't have the best life. She felt unwanted, unloved, all this kind of thing. She's angry and she wants to go back in time. All she's got is this photo, and she wants to go back in time to basically confront her parents and tell them how much she ruined their life. And we haven't had a character that angry before. So that was an interesting read, and it just all came together, and I was sobbing by the end of it. I was in bits. Then we had the comedian, like I said, didn't really do anything for me, although they appear in the first story too, the comedians. And then we had the sister, which is all about, there were 2 sisters, super close, and unfortunately one of them passes away unexpectedly. Well, is kind of out of the blue, and the sister that's left has not been able to cope with that sister passing away. And so we have this whole very unexpected story where it's not the sister who's left who returns. So, oh my gosh, that made me sob as well. That was just, it tore my heart. It really did. And throughout all this, there's a book being read by one of the characters, which is kind of like 100 questions to make you think before the end of the world. And it says things like, if you have young children, would you A, tell them the world will end tomorrow, or B, not tell them the world? It's always like, the world's going to end tomorrow, what would you do, A or B? There's an interesting one where it's like, if you have a mistress, would you A, spend your final day on earth with your wife, or would you B, spend it with your mistress? Like, there's all these kind of little bits put in there which were very random, but actually I enjoyed. So I'm going to say there's at least 2, maybe 3 more books in this series. I am not in any rush to read the other 3. The first book I think I will always reread, and I think I will read this one. This could be read completely as a standalone. You would not have to read the other 2 at all. And this had a lot more about autumn and seeing the leaves change because of where the cafe is and this, and you're by the mountain and seasonal changes. And so this would be a great autumnal read if you are a seasonal reader. But I'm not in any rush. Also, I always feel a bit let down because there are cats on every single one of these books, I think, and there's no cats in the story. So that always lets me down. A series I finished, which I know some of you have picked up as well, is The Voyage Home. This is book 3 in the Women of Troy series by Pat Barker. I gave this, I want to say, 4.5 I gave this. Wasn't quite as good as the original first book, but it was pretty good. This is historical fiction. This is a retelling of set during the Trojan War and the end of the Trojan War. And in this one, again, I listened to it narrated as well as the book. In this one, Troy has fallen. The women have been given out as spoils of war. And now the Greeks can finally leave and head home, hence the title, The Voyage Home. Also, these covers are so stunning. I absolutely love them so much. And in this one, what I found a bit confusing, especially as I listened to the audiobook, is the same narrator as the other 2 audiobooks. But the narrator in those books was doing the voice of Briseis, who's our main character in the other 2 books. Briseis isn't really in this book. She's at it very slightly at the beginning because the person in this book we're really following is Ritza, who is Briseis's mother's friend, who belongs to King Agamemnon, now has been given as a slave to Agamemnon, whereas Briseis is going off in a different boat. So we see them having to part, which is quite sad. But because it's the same narrator, I kept expecting it to be Briseis. Even though she did a different type of voice, it took me a while to kind of realise this is not Briseis talking, it's Ritza. And we have met Ritza in the previous 2 books as well. And Ritza is accompanying, is the lady's maid, the slave, whatever you want to. There's a particular term that is used in here for her job description that made me laugh, but I can't say it on camera what it is, but it made me really laugh. And she is kind of looking after Cassandra. Now, for those of you who don't know, Cassandra was the youngest daughter of Priam, king of Troy, and youngest or one of the youngest daughters. She was a priestess of Apollo. It's always difficult. This is a mythology, but she could be anywhere between 14 and 18. We're just not sure. And not 14, 15 and 18. She's a priestess of Troy, of Apollo. She wanted the gift of prophecy because, for those of you who don't know, Apollo wasn't just the god of the sun and beauty. He was the god of prophecies. He was also the god of plagues and rats. He was a very multi-complex god, but she wanted the gift of prophecy, and so she goes to become priestess, and Apollo grants her the gift of prophecy, but then wants more from her in return, and because she rejects him, he then curses her so that her prophecies are never believed, which sort of drives Cassandra mad. And this is why in a lot of books that I've read that are retellings with Cassandra in it, she's not a very likable character, and she's not likable in this book either, really. But I always think, put yourself in Cassandra's shoes. If you were cursed with the gift of prophecy and you could see the fall of your town, the murder of your brothers, the trauma of your sisters, the destruction of your life, your own death, then I'm not surprised you may go a little bit mad with no one believing you, but you have these visions, you know it's going to happen. And I think Pat Barker deals really well with the idea of her going into almost these traumatic withdrawals, these insular moments where Cassandra is completely broken at times and Ritza has to be there for her. And then when she comes out of those, Cassandra's almost angry that someone's seen her in that state, you know. Now, I don't want to give spoilers, but I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm just going to say, if you don't want a spoiler, maybe silence this bit now. But the whole point is that Cassandra knows that Agamemnon is going to be murdered when he returns home to his wife Clytemnestra, and he's a king, you know, to his palace, and Cassandra will be murdered alongside him, and she knows this. So he is a very cruel man. He is cruel to Briseis in the earlier books because he takes her from Achilles at one point for a very short time. He is cruel. He he's just horrible. I don't want to go into details, but he's a very, very horrible person. And you see some of that on page, which I will say, this book, out of the three, this book you see more on page stuff than you do in the previous books, especially along certain topics. So I would suggest, if you've read the other two but you're worried about that, maybe look up some warnings, but content warnings. Yeah, so that was a bit hard to read, and Cassandra's kind of going mad. She's got this man who has taken her as his prize and does what he is expected to do, having taken this girl as his prize, and she is dealing with that daily. And also she knows what's going to be happening. She has a very complicated relationship with her mother Hecate. She's kept away from the other women a lot of the time. Her father has passed away, and there's stuff to deal with, Priam's funeral and stuff in here, and she knows what's going to happen to her, and she knows she won't live, and that is hard to read. This was there are moments of joy, that things that made me laugh out loud. Ritza is a lovely person. She's very sweet, and she gets a little bit of joy as well. She gets a little bit of a storyline, especially on the ship going home, on the voyage home. And what I loved that Pat Barker did, now usually they get home very quickly in the myth, and immediately that night Cassandra and Agamemnon are murdered. But in this one, because the book would have been over within like 100 pages, Pat Barker extends it a little bit. We have more on the voyage home. We don't have them going straight to the palace straight away, and then there's a little bit afterwards. And what I loved about this book is, considering how much Ritza dislikes Cassandra most of the book, and how much we're like, so she's just not likable, even though you can really feel for her. When what happens, and Ritza has this realization of, actually, she did love Cassandra. She did care for Cassandra. She was complicated, but actually she was just this young girl who was going through a lot and had no one on her side. And to see Ritza's grief during that time, and to see how Ritza then deals with the aftermath of what happens to Cassandra, yeah, it was very, I cried, guys. I cried. Normally if a book I cry, I'd give it a 5. But I was comparing it to the first book, Science of the Girls, and it didn't quite get me there. It was a beautiful ending. I'm so sad it's over. What I would love is a little novella, a little short story where Pat Barker brings back like Briseis and maybe Ritza and a few of the others, and they kind of meet up later in life. I don't think that's going to happen, but this will be one of my favourite retelling series, and I will reread this series many, many times, and I'm sure cry every single time. So if you're reading it, I was going to say, for me it was a good ending. I'd love to know, if you do read the whole series, how you feel about the ending. So then I read Pirates by Celia Reese, and I gave this one, let me just check, 3.75. Now this is the weird thing. This got a 3.5 and only half of it I enjoyed. Whereas this book I loved, and I flew through it. Like, I didn't want to put this book down. Some of the other books it took me over 2 weeks to finish. This book I finished within a few days. Loved it. Now, I have read only one Celia Reese before, and it was Mercy, and it was fiction, as this is, historical fiction. I think it's YA, both of them were. And Mercy's based on the true life happenings when some native indigenous people came over from Canada and kidnapped this whole group of women, and white women and children, took them back, and how that happened, and then how these women were ransomed for, and some of them came back to America, and some of them preferred to stay with the people who'd taken them because they were just treated better and had more rights. And that was a fascinating book. I read that in 2 days, I think. I just think I like Celia Reese's writing. She's really easy to read. She's very engaging. There's not lots of like big words or beautiful lyrical writing, but there's just something enjoyable about her books. I don't read a lot of YA. I read middle grade and adult. That's where I mainly sit, but I really enjoyed this. So what's it about? So we have 2 young girls. We have Nancy Kingston, who is white and from Bristol, and we have Minerva Sharp, who is mixed race and an enslaved person on a plantation. And it's not a plantation in America. I think it's in the Caribbean. I can't remember quite where it is. So Nancy is the only daughter of a man who owns ships and all that kind of thing. And her mother dies when she's quite young, and she's left to just kind of grow up and do what she wants. She's got a whole load of older brothers. She goes, plays with the local kids, and she particularly befriends this one boy whose parents own a bar. Well, his dad's a sailor and his mum owns a local bar called William. And that becomes her love interest. That's not a spoiler. It happens very, very quickly. And as Nancy's growing up, William, at the age of 13, is signed on to a ship because his father's a sailor and he wants his son on a ship. And when William comes back, and it's one of her father's ships, I think, when William comes back, he tells Nancy that the ship was a slaver ship, how traumatic it was for him, for the people, the enslaved people they took, the disgusting conditions, the amount of people who died on both sides, and just how much he's traumatized by the whole thing. And Nancy then realizes that her father has a few slaver ships. Now, Celia is looking at this through the glass of a more modern society because Nancy is appalled. She hates it. I'm not saying sailors, especially young boys who were sailors on slaver ships, wouldn't have had a horrific time seeing the reality of it. But you know, that there is that looking back. I don't know how many people, especially at the beginning, really understood how horrific the whole thing was. But that was only a small kind of like in my head thought. But I loved Nancy. She's feisty and she's opinionated and she believes in treating people equally. She doesn't see class. And when her father dies at 16, she is sent off to this plantation that he owns on this Caribbean island. And she gets there and she meets Minerva and Minerva's mother, Phyllis, who are the main house servants. And it's a sugar plantation, and it talks about as a child how she would get these little bits of sugar and brown sugar and molasses and, you know, treat other little kids that had never had it. But when she gets there and sees the absolute horrific way that it is actually made, produced from the sugar cane, and the way that the overseer treats the enslaved people on the plantation, she is horrified. She then tries to make friends with Minerva. Minerva's very wary of that because, you know, who's this white girl coming in trying to be friendly with me when the overseer might, like, punish me? But they develop a kind of friendship. And then Nancy's trying to put her foot down about how she expects people to be treated. That does not go well. And then she finds out that she has been given in marriage to the plantation owner next door, who is a horrendous man. And there are some scenes in this that are obviously upsetting and disturbing. It's YA, so there's not too many of them, but there are some, you know, that's what happened. And so something happens, and Minerva and Nancy do something, which means they have to then go on the run, and they team up with this bunch of pirates, and we go from there. They're on the high seas being pirates. They go on the account, they sign the accords, they're having a pirating good time, and all the while they're off doing what they're doing, and she's hunting for William. The guy she was meant to marry is tracking them down all the way through the book. There is this, you just know, there's always this shadow. Doesn't matter how fun it is, what they're up to. A lot of the other pirates in here are great. The other pirates on the ships that they're with, like Vincent and Broom and all those people, brilliant. There's some swashbuckling action, and there's some pirates who are awful, and you're always like, oh my gosh, are the girls going to be all right? And there's moments where, you know, could really taken a dark turn. But all this time, there's this pressure and this black cloud of him following them on the ship. And I just loved it. I just loved the book. It was great to read. Now, it is literally only gets to when Nancy's about 17. I will say we've got this all the way through the book where we are waiting. This is nearly 400 pages, this book. Of the first 100 odd pages, Nancy's like growing up in Bristol. So we have him following them and them trying to outrun them. And it was all over. The confrontation was over within like 2 pages. And I did feel that let it down a bit because you're really waiting and it's tense. And how are they going to get out of it? And boom, it's done. Done really quickly. So that's another reason it didn't get like a 4 for me. Although thinking about it, maybe I'll give it a 4 just for enjoyment, because my ratings are really like loosey-goosey. It gets a 5 if it makes me cry or I learn something amazing from it, and it gets a 4 if it's just enjoyable but also like an in-depth read. I don't know. I don't have strict rules, but it's a 3.7, I really do think. And so yes, that's where we have it. It ends up with Nancy has kind of written this book. It's going to be handed to Daniel Defoe, who wrote about pirates, and she's off to find her new life. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It was a great read, especially after some of the other reads. And the final book I want to talk about is another Agatha Christie, and thank goodness I picked up another one. This is Capital Christie. It is a cloth hardbound. Look at that book. Look at it. Just look at it. And the end covers. Now, I have the seasonal ones that they brought out before, where they're like you know, spring, summer, winter, and they are bringing another one out of these cloth bounds. So when this just came, and it's literally just come out in the last month or 2, these are 12 stories short stories that Agatha Christie wrote that are based in London. There are some of her really famous ones. We have Miss Marple, we have Poirot, we have Parker Pyne, we have Mr. Quinn, we have Tommy and Tuppence, and we have standalones in here. Some of my favourites, The Affair at the Victory Ball, I always enjoyed that one. The Tuesday Night Club, which if you know anything about the Thursday Murder Club, it was based on that story, The Tuesday Night Club, because it's a club where Agatha and like her nephew and everything get together and discuss murder mysteries and what's really happened, and she always gets the right answer. And so when Richard Osman wrote the Thursday Murder Club, he based the title on this short story. We have The Adventure of the Clapham Cooks, really, really well known. We have The Kidnapped Prime Minister, which is super well known. The Adventure of the Cheap Flats, super well known. That's a Poirot. So 12 little short stories with lots of great people in them. Now, I gave this one, I believe, a 4. The reason being, it's got a couple of my favourite stories in there. It's also got one that I'm going to tell you guys I can't remember reading before. Some of it felt vaguely remember, but if I've ever read this before, I think it must have been once. And that is the Listerdale Mystery. Now, I will say, I'm sure it's the Listerdale Mystery. I will say that it's not like a big mystery. It's not like out there. There's no murder, really. There's nothing like that. It's just a really sweet story. And I thoroughly enjoyed it because I really couldn't remember how it ended or anything about it. But it's got a few stories in here I don't like. So The Fairy in the Flat is Tommy and Tuppence. It's not the best Tommy and Tuppence short story. And The Lonely God is just a story I can take or leave. I don't really like it at all. Like, it's Agatha, so it's written well, but I just don't really like the story. So it got a 4, but, you know, it should get 5 just for the cover. Look how beautiful that is. And this was just a great book to finish the month on, because I'd had, like I said, a few flops, a few struggles, some books that I really couldn't get through. I'd had some good audiobooks and some okay audiobooks, but I did have a few good books. So I mean, you know, these were good reads. some of them, like this one, had a few bits, but these were good reads. So yes, if you are into Agatha Christie and have not seen these hardbacks, they are stunning. And I love the fact they're always little short stories, so that's always exciting because, you know, I love the theme. I love the spring, summer, winter, autumn theme. The covers are beautiful. And this is all in London, which is stunning. I can't remember what the next one is, but there is one coming out later this year that I will be buying. And like, if we just compare these, there is no comparison. I'm not trying to be rude by Charles Osborne. Like I said, I'm sure he's a great, amazing writer. And her great-grandson, I think, said how much he loved this book, or her grandson said how much he loved this book, and how Agatha would have been happy with it. And I'm sure she would have. I don't know. It wasn't for me. Whereas this, a balm to my Agatha Christie little soul. Needed this after reading Black Coffee this month. And I had a few good audiobooks. I really can't wait to continue on with Children of Gods and Fighting Men, and I really enjoyed Songbird. So yes, guys, that's it for now. Lots of chatting as always in these videos. 12 books, some good, some really not. Oh, no 5-star. Did I give anything a 5-star? I don't think I did. No 5 stars this month by the looks of things, which is a bit sad, but a few 4 stars. A couple of new series started with the Alpha and Omega and the Gale Song series. A couple of series finished-ish for me with this and this one. I'm really not rushing out to get any of the others. I might read the back of them and pick one up maybe next year, but that's that. A couple of real misses for me, and just some other ones that you just want to listen to that are a bit, not the most amazing thing in the world, but a good read. And after all, that's what reading is about. I am a great believer in, I know a lot of people say 3 stars is a bad rating. For me, it's not. 3 stars is middle of the road. You read a book to enjoy it, and as long as you've enjoyed reading it, it doesn't matter if you'll never read it again, if you'll forget all about it next week, if it hasn't taught you anything, if it's not been the most exciting book in the world. You know, like a lot of cozy mysteries or romances fall into that category. But if they give you joy as a reader, that to me is all that is important. It's the books that you don't enjoy, like this one and this one. I should have DNF'd this, but I wanted to see what everyone was going on about. I really did, because it's got so many great reviews and I don't know what I'm missing. So yes, and I have to track down a copy of Black Coffee, and I've been looking and I really can't find it, so I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe that play does not exist in the play form anymore. But anyway, let me know if there's anything here that has caught your eye, even if it's just this one for how much I disliked and you're thinking, I'm going to pick it up just to see what I think. Also, let me know if you are reading any of these series. Like I said, I know some of you are reading this one. Let me know how you're getting on with that. And also, I'd love to know what your favourite read of July was. I only had one DNF, and I'm super sad about it because it was a book of short stories all focused on cats. But it was quite an old book. I think it was written in the 80s with authors like Oscar Wilde and that. And I couldn't get into it. So I only had one DNF, which isn't too bad. I should have had at least 2 more. But I carried on. I persevered. And it was a better reading month in some ways than last month. That's it for now, guys. Thank you so much. If you have watched to the end of this video, please leave me, what do I want you to leave me? Oh, a pirate. Leave me some sort of pirate emoji. Treasure, coins, I don't know if there's actual pirates, ships, palm trees, whatever it is, leave me some sort of pirate emoji to let me know you've got all the way to the end. As always, thank you so much for watching, and please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. I will be back again soon with another reading wrap up once August is over. But until then, guys, wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having lots and lots of bookish fun. Bye for now.